Now, the last talk will be given by Franklin Orr. Lynn is the Undersecretary for Science and Energy in the Department of Energy, one of the institutions that don't claim to be national. They're just a department. But of course, fundamental science, physical science in particular, is funded to a very large extent by the Office of Science within the Department of Energy. And we're looking forward, we're grateful for Lynn to come to us and talk to us about how his agency is addressing the big questions of science of relevance to our field. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thanks, Baron, for the introduction. It's good to be here this morning. The Secretary Moniz sends his regrets. He couldn't be here with you this morning, but you might have noticed if you've watched the news at all lately that he's been a busy lad. And I think it could be argued that, that the physics research community played a really important role in the ability to get to an agreement, get to a framework. We'll see where that leads, but until the conversations involved the physicists, it was moving much more slowly. So I'm here instead to say a few words about science in the Department of Energy and what we're trying to add to the wonderful mix that you heard about already this morning. I'll start with a bit of the fundamentals. So what drives us at the Department of Energy? Well, one obviously is fundamental discovery science, and we've heard great things this morning about that already. But it's also about the energy part of what we do. And so my job as the Undersecretary for Science and Energy is to really think about both of those. If you think about how humans on Earth, there is now incontrovertible evidence that we humans are a global biogeochemical force. You can see that in the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, CO2 and other greenhouse gases. You can see it in the pH of the ocean. You can see it in the interactions of every sort at almost every scale around the surface of the planet, and even a bit in the oceans. So if we think about that, what's one of the primary ways we humans interact with all those natural systems that were described so nicely in the last talk? Well, it's energy. We need to be able to supply the energy it takes to support modern societies around the planet. We do that better in some places than others. But in any case, it's so fundamental, it's woven through every bit, every element of the fabric of modern societies. So supplying those needs and at the same time protecting the planet in a way that we need to do much better is a fundamental driver for us as well. Now, the good news, of course, is that there's no shortage of primary energy resources that we can convert into energy services. The sun, the wind, water, thermal energy within the Earth's upper crust, fossil fuels, nuclear resources, there are plenty of them. There's no shortage of that primary energy resource at all. But the main question, of course, is how do we transform those into the energy services that we all value, but probably mostly take for granted? And that requires both science and engineering. And I'll try to make that point as I go forward here. So the good news is that we have a president who actually understands that dealing with the way we interact with the planet is something that we have to do, and that it has an urgency that should be part of how we think about all this. And he recently boosted our greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets to committing the United States to up to 28% reductions by 2025. Now, 2025 might seem like a long way away to some of us, but for those of us who think about the scale of the energy systems for the planet, it seems terrifyingly close. So to get there, we're going to need all the tools that we have in our toolkit now, plus some more that we need to invent. And much of what we do at the Department of Energy is about making those inventions and making them economically practical. So I would argue that the physical sciences are absolutely critical to discovering and inventing the next set of energy transformations for us, and for sensing the planet around us and understanding how it all works. Many of you probably know that DOE is the largest funder of basic sciences in the United States, in the physical sciences at least, supporting something like 25,000 researchers nationwide at universities and national labs and other institutions around the country, and even more through the user facilities we support at a number of the national labs. So when Secretary Moniz joined the department a couple of years ago, one of the first things he did was to restructure the department to create three parts. One is the part that deals with the nuclear deterrence. That set of expertises was much at play in the discussions with Iran. Another part is cleaning up after the legacy of all the Cold War manufacture of the nuclear weapons. And the third part is the good part, the fun part, and that's the science and energy part, and that's the part that I'm lucky enough to be able to lead. So the idea behind combining these was to say, okay, we understand that science goes to work in the energy space, and the energy space provides plenty of challenges for science to do a better job of helping us accomplish the goals. The idea of a portfolio is pretty important here. We need a fully enriched portfolio that goes from the fundamental science to applications with plenty of technology and engineering in the middle, and with a variety of timescales for application. So our job is to try to build our version of the portfolio that was described so nicely in the last talk. So we're working at that at a variety of ways, both by supporting and sustaining the fundamental science, but also working on a set of cross-cutting initiatives that deal with things like the grid. The National Academy of Engineering said the grid was the greatest invention of the 20th century. We now need to turn that into the greatest invention of the 21st century, with a sensor-laden, active controls, managed system with all the computing it takes to do that going forward. So lots of cross-cutting research, but at its heart, it depends on the underlying science that supports everything we do. So let me focus for a few minutes on the question of particle physics research. We've had for some time now a group of talented physicists working on a report known universally now as the P5 report, the Particle Physics Project Prioritization Panel, which is a triumph of alliteration in title selection. And they've been working on putting together a picture of what particle physics might look like in the years ahead. There's a lot in that report, but let me just say a few words about some of the key conclusions. One is that the kind of science that we're talking about, just as the as the International Space Station was an international collaborative project, many of the kinds of projects we're likely to undertake in the future are also going to be that sort of international project, partly because the costs are so big and partly because it's very useful to bring together the science communities around the world. It's in many cases no longer an option to be a single nation going it alone. That conclusion has been a while informing, but it took the excellent work of the P5 report to rally the community around that and to recognize that combining forces with our international partners will be an important component of what we do in the future. The United States, of course, is already participating in a big way at LHC at CERN and will play an important role in the accelerator and detector upgrades at LHC. Upgrades that, in fact, were identified by P5 as the highest priority large project for particle physics in the near term. Somewhere around 1,250 U.S. physicists conduct research on ATLAS at CMS and CMS at CERN. Most of them participating here in the U.S. at their home institutions through ultra high broadband communications, thereby illustrating the idea that being able to handle massive amounts of data and compute with that in order to be able to interpret the experiments is a key part of what we do. Day before yesterday, I was in Chicago to do an announcement that DOE is investing in now the third machine in the so-called Coral sequence. This is one that will be 18 times faster than the machine it'll replace, Mira. This is the new Aurora machine. It's a couple of $100 million investment with Intel and Cray to really work toward exascale computing, the ability to tackle the toughest physical simulation problems at a speed that is workable and that doesn't actually require a whole power plant next to the computer in order to be able to run the darn thing. So, important research that underlines everything we do. With the recent upgrades at LHC, now circulating protons again, this time at even higher energies, there will be lots to discover there, I'm sure. And this model also gives us a way to look at what I think is the common thread between the three talks you've heard this morning: neutrinos. The long baseline neutrino facility is on the drawing boards as well. The reconceptualization of the long baseline neutrino facility as an international effort hosted at Fermilab is attracting lots of attention internationally, and the group around that has begun to assemble a good bit faster than I think any of us thought would be the case. The President's budget request for FY16 has $16 million in it for project engineering and design of LBNF, and we're hopeful that that will be funded as we work our way through the Congress in the budget year this year. Though we do know, of course, as was mentioned previously, that it's going to be a tough funding year. The proposed project engineering design funding puts some new life into this project, but it's not a done deal, and I think it's important for all of us to recognize that it's a first step and that we have to keep working hard to support it going forward. The tasks are recruiting the international partners, designing an effective model of governance, and project management, and we have some good examples in the international front on that, and some other examples that have not been as successful. And then of course there's the design of the facility itself. But there's enough of a consensus now in the particle physics community that this is an excellent way to go, and that we can bring this project online. And it will provide us with another major world-class facility at Fermilab. So P5 has also made some important recommendations about our ongoing efforts in the cosmic frontier and the study of dark matter, dark energy, and inflation. In these areas, we work closely with other U.S. agencies and international partners. And as Dr. Grunsfeld well knows, this is an area where we have a very positive and productive collaboration with NASA and also with NSF. And the Department of Energy's national labs bring lots of special capabilities to the table in this area of research. The primary detectors, for example, in NASA's Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope were built by DOE and a NASA partnership led by SLAC National Accelerator Lab. And the ultra-sensitive camera for the Dark Energy Survey, which is a DOE and NSF partnership, was designed and built by Fermilab. And just this past month, we saw a very interesting synergistic result involving both of these experiments. The Dark Energy Survey spotted some new dwarf galaxies, or what did you call them, toddler galaxies? I like that. I have every intention of stealing that line. Dwarf galaxies are thought to be good candidates for being dominated by dark matter. And the Fermilab Gamma Ray Telescope was able to train its detector on those galaxies looking for evidence of dark matter. Now, no dark matter was detected, but the results put new limits on the parameters of dark matter going forward, a result that will help constrain future dark matter research. So all this is a way to say that the P5 report has encouraged us to continue our efforts in a host of important physics challenges and to give rise to the LBNF, and it's highlighted the potential promise of new projects in partnership with NSF for the next generation of studies in dark energy. So I mentioned earlier that I wanted to touch on the future of physics research, particularly related to the tools and facilities that DOE has recently put in place. I can tell you here that there's lots of exciting developments for facilities in high energy physics and nuclear physics. In the high energy physics area, the NUMMI off-axis neutrino appearance, or NOVA project, was completed in September of last year. This project involved construction of a couple of detectors 500 miles apart, a 300-ton NEAR detector constructed underground at Fermilab in Illinois, and a 14,000-ton FAR detector constructed in northern Minnesota. The distance between the NEAR and FAR detectors may enable NOVA to measure the mass hierarchy of the three known types of neutrinos for the first time. Both were successfully completed on schedule in September 2014, and NOVA has begun taking some data. In the nuclear physics arena, we've seen the successful completion of the 12 GeV upgrade of the Continuous Electron Beam Accelerator facility at Jefferson Lab, which received its CD4 approval, officially marking the project completion 5 months ahead of schedule last July. And last year, the relativistic heavy ion collider at Brookhaven broke records of luminosity. RIC remains the only dedicated heavy ion collider in the world and the only polarized proton collider. And we've recently seen some upgrades of both RIC's detectors in anticipation of the new runs with polarized protons. And finally, the construction of the facility for rare isotope beams at Michigan State University is well underway, with $100 million provided in the President's 2016 budget request and completion expected in 2022. So from a facility standpoint, at least, in high energy and nuclear physics, we're looking at a positive, healthy picture with some new tools and some strengthened older tools. And we're confident that those will lead to scientific advancements and breakthroughs that those of us on the technology side will put to work in the future. So I'll close with just a few parting thoughts, and then I'll echo a certain request. For the faculty members in the room, I just would like to remind you that how important it is to train the next generation of physicists for the nation. We know that retaining scientific leadership in the United States will depend on a healthy and sizable force of scientists making important discoveries at our nation's research facilities. For the students in the room, I'll say first, I am envious of you. You're at a stage where the future is bright and there's all kinds of wonderful work to be done with practically every question we answer providing a wonderful new set of questions for all of us to think about. You're studying a subject that is an essential underpinning of everything else we do. There are lots of tools available and there's endless opportunity. For all the other researchers and physicists in the room, you know, of course, that the work you do is important as well, and we're looking forward to what you will accomplish. The example of the P5 report is one that gives us hope of our research communities coming together to outline a research agenda that can really lead our way into the future. Now, of course, a key component of this is that we have to get through the budget requests that are before the Congress now. And so you can help us with all of that by voicing your support for fundamental science across the agencies and across the nation. It's a key component of what we do. Telling stories about what can be accomplished and why it matters to humans and the quest for knowledge is something all of us can do. And then if you're interested in specific facilities, you can support those as well. So with that, I will stop and wish you continued success and a good APS meeting. Thank you.
So thank you very much for these very general and encouraging remarks about how the support of science in the Department of Energy is progressing. Let me start with a question and then open it up. I mean, one of the impressions that in the scientific community is quite broad is that on the one hand, the United States is ahead of most other nations in the systems and the ability to control the risks and success of projects, of large projects, which are executed very well and ahead of time, on schedule, on cost. At the same time, there's a general impression that we still struggle with how to do effectively and successfully international collaboration. Of course, part of that is due to the differences in how we do budgets in the United States than in most of the rest of the world. But do you see a particular, how do you see the progress evolving in that domain, and what can we as scientists do to help push that along?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's an excellent question. I think we have existence proofs on both sides of the spectrum that you mentioned. LHC and CERN, I think, is an example of an international project that has gone very well, which has really brought people together in a very productive way and assembled a big and pretty darn complicated machine in a good way. The International Fusion Reactor has been behind schedule, for example, and has not done as well. And I think if you look at the reasons for that, partly they're around governance, and so I think that gives us some lessons for example, for the Long Baseline Neutrino Facility. You need to have somebody who's in charge and somebody that has the ability to keep the project on schedule and make sure that the component pieces and the participants do what they promised when they promised. So that we will, of course, take that into account as we try to put together the team that will work on LBNF. The other thing that I think is a lesson is that having the designs be far enough along that you really have reasonable cost estimates and can stick with them is an important component of it too. And so that means that we need to support the design process adequately in order to be able to deliver that. Now, you asked how can the physics community help? First, by defining the project and its science very well. The scientific case, I think, is well underway, but we need to continue that. And two, by scrubbing the designs in a hard way to make sure that we have realistic budget estimates that people can agree to and then stick to. I will say that the Office of Science within the Department of Energy, the Office of Science has the best track record for doing this. We all wish we had done as well in other parts of the agency. So I think you've led the way in lots of important ways there, and we hope to learn those lessons going forward.
So you mentioned the importance of training the young future leaders here in the United States, and personally, as a young scientist, I see my future here in the United States looking very uncertain. Over the years where I was a graduate student, every year our budget was slashed, but it was only slashed 10% because we were so amazing and we did such great work. Mm. And so, yes, and so year after year, that as a young person is not very encouraging. And so I realize that it's a fiscally challenging time. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering, in your opinion, or if you know of any initiatives that you can think of that maybe the Department of Energy or the NSF is doing to help support young scientists during this fiscally challenging time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I am completely sympathetic, and if I were king, the budgets would be a lot better, and I have a personal strong bias in support of the younger members of the community, even though I do know, of course, that it takes the full spectrum. I think this year is likely to be a tough year. Last year, DOE actually did pretty well in the budgets. We'll see how it plays out this year. The initial signals from Capitol Hill seem to indicate that there's going to be a lot of attention to fiscal restraint. Having said that, at least in the Department of Energy, we are working right now. In fact, I just met with the Secretary yesterday to talk about a series of traineeships, new traineeship support for young investigators and students in areas where we see a need for future development. And we will continue to encourage the user facilities to make sure that there's an opportunity for young investigators to play a role there as well. So I understand your concerns and sympathize with them completely.
Thank you.